Jody, if you could just take us back to that moment where you're counting down and you're hearing the recommendations, you're a healthy person, you're young, you're not in these kind of high risk categories, and there's not a lot of information about this, what we now know is a very deadly virus. And you cross day 12, day 13, day 14. Can you tell us a little bit about both the symptoms you're having, but also what begins to go on for you mentally and emotionally?
I had probably very early symptoms starting up March 8th, but they were so mild that I just disregarded it. It was just a little phlegmy throat. By March 27th is when I woke up and I felt like a truck had hit me. And that's when I knew, okay, this is COVID. I did a telehealth and I gave them my symptoms, which were just headache, fatigue, body aches. And they said, take Tylenol, stay hydrated, and sleep. That was my recommendation. So I thought, okay. And then into the second week, I started to have heart pain. So I did another telehealth call, and this was an ER doctor. And he said, if you're 55 years old and you have heart pain, you need to go to the ER. So I went in and I was terrified. It was like an out-of-body experience. And they finally got a stable EKG, and then they discharged me and they gave me 2 Tylenol. And that was it. And they said, follow up with this cardiologist. And that was it. And so I came home, and unfortunately I reached out to that cardiologist the very next day, but because he was on the front lines, he didn't get back to me for about 2.5 weeks. And at that point I had stopped sleeping because the pain was so bad from the heart.
Such a strange time for everyone in healthcare, so much disruption and fear. Can you talk a little bit about the pericarditis and what how that has kind of sat with you?
The cardiologist that I was referred to, he just had me on aspirin, and he had given me a prescription for sleep for Xanax, which I didn't know anything about. It did put me to sleep. However, then I started to read up on it, and there's a high propensity for dependence. And so I was only on that for about 2 weeks, and then I weaned myself off, and that was icky and uncomfortable. I also just want to say, growing up, there was a huge stigma about medication in my family. No one had needed any medication. And actually, my grandmother was an alcoholic. So there was a huge stigma around medication and a lot of fear around medication.
And also around addiction. I mean, benzodiazepines
and addiction, yes.
bind to the same receptors in alcohol. And so oftentimes in families that have struggled with addiction or families that have been influenced by AA, there is a real hesitation around medication, but particularly benzos is an idea that they can be very addictive. You maybe have some genetics that predispose you towards that. So, and you were, sounds like kind of California hippie, growing your fruits and vegetables and doing Pilates and eating, lots of plants. So, as you said, up until this point, you really had been very intentional, as you said, of taking care of not just your physical, but also your mental and your spiritual health.